Welcome back to Keeks Custom Builds. Today we have a little bit of a strange video here. We have a customer who brought in this Yamaha right here because it has a blown up engine. And all he said it would need is a cylinder wall, but that was about 4 years ago before it was left completely uncovered. And mud daubers built their nests in the intake. It's just been sitting outside, getting dirty down inside of the engine. So we're gonna have to pull this whole thing out. Plus, everything's already taken apart. So we got random bolts, random mud dauber nests right there, just pieces of it all over the place in boxes. So this is going to be quite the exciting build to try to get this back to one complete side-by-side. So I hope you enjoy this video. It's going to be a wild one. Now that I've gotten all the useful parts and stuff out of the bed and the floor and covered up the intake, it's going to be going outside for a quick power wash to get it nice and clean. Now that it's clean, let's see what the stuff is we got to work with here. So we got a new head for it. Got some hot cams, one cam in there, some random new pieces here, gaskets, timing chain, plugs for the crankcase probably, and then all this stuff right here has to go somewhere. Then there's this big bore cylinder head right here. We're gonna be making some real horsepower out of this 660. It's also what we discovered on it. The tag says it's a 660 Rhino. So this is all the old stuff. Got a gasket here, got a rack. It already has a rack on it, so I don't know why this is in here. But just a whole bunch of random stuff. Got a piston right here. See, ooh, looks like that got a little bit crunchy. I think I know why it might have failed there. Let's check out the cylinder wall here. There's not really any big damage in it. A little notch right there in the cylinder wall, but yeah, head also looks okay. 5 valve. So it must have just wadded it up in there. I don't know. Pretty jacked up though. So with the amount of damage on this piston here and the amount of slop here in the rod section with the crank, it's definitely going to need a new crank and rod there comes welded together. So we're gonna have to get a new one of those, which means it's gonna be a complete engine rebuild. You can see that it was definitely the right decision to do a complete rebuild on this. So we're gonna take it out of here, split it apart, break it down, replace all the bearings and gaskets, and rebuild it. As you can see here, I started with the disassembly, got the clutch cover off, got the primary cage off of it, and now we're just gonna work on disconnecting all the little bits that are still connected. Got a line here, got some wires, and the drive shaft unfortunately goes straight into the engine or the transmission, which is one piece from the front and the back. So it's going to be a pain to get apart, which is something we're going to have to figure out to get this motor out of here. Now let me get this clutch stuff out of here so I can get this plastic piece off, and then it'll be a whole lot lighter and easier to pull out. When you go to take the clutches off of these, the center parts try to move out, and they have little rollers inside of there, so when they move out, the rollers fall out of place. So you're going to want to make sure to keep this center section pressed in if you flip it over or pull it out or whatever, because if these fall out you won't know it, and then you'll put it back together and you'll burn up belts. So just make sure to remember that. And it's also a whole lot easier to just pull the whole secondary clutch off with the belt, because then you don't have to fight it and it's just a whole lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff out of here. So this engine pull has been an absolute nightmare to get to this point right here with one loose drive shaft. So here is how it all goes together. We got engine mounts right here, one nut on the bottom of each of these pads, one here and one down there. And then for the front one, you can see there's a hole right here a big bolt goes all the way through it, and those little pads look pretty much the same. Just goes under there. But then there are also these little 8mm guys. One goes in right there, which is on this mount, and then one comes from the other side in pretty much the same spot in the motor. You're not gonna be able to see it because it's sitting down in the hole. So once you get those mounts out, you have to pick it up, turn it almost completely on its side to fit the secondary off. Then you can fit the plastic backside off there. Next, you have to pull the rear diff, which they did some magnificent welds on. I'm pretty sure these welds shrunk up the rear tabs, so it wasn't able to slide the diff all the way back and get it out of the way to grab that shaft out. So since there wasn't enough room back there, we had to come up to the front. There is one big bolt that goes through the front right here. There's tabs right there. And then there's two smaller bolts. One comes from this side. You can see where they go through right there. And then another small bolt, like that one right there, comes through back in there. So then once you get all those out, slide this front diff forward, and hopefully you have enough room to get to the loose drive shaft. Now I'll pull that out and then start working on getting this front section disconnected. So I got the front drive shaft disconnected right there. It just slides apart. It's a little slip joint. This rear drive shaft is not coming out of the engine, so I'm gonna have to pull the whole thing out with that drive shaft on it. But I've been working on yanking this thing out here, and there was one wire holding it. It's super sneaky. It must be like a crankshaft positioning sensor or something like that. And it hides right down in there. So if you're just looking at it, thinking you got everything off it, make sure you check right here under the head and get that little guy out of there. You don't want to rip those wires out. And just like that, I got the engine out and a trip to the chiropractor all set up, because you have to stand on that bar there and then the bar here and lift it out by yourself while hunched over. So that's super good for the back. And who needs two people to do it? Because you can just do it with one. Now I'm gonna get it out of here and onto the ground or wherever we're gonna start working on it. And I'm gonna get a video of all these hoses too, so that I can remember where they go. It looks like all the stuff left on it is water line or water hose, except for this guy right here, some sort of vent, and some oil tubes here and here. That looks like it's pretty much it though. Now I'm gonna start taking all these lines and stuff off of here, and then we'll start stripping it down. I'm gonna start by getting this oil line off of here so I can grab the starter off. So I'm gonna break this loose right here since this one's already missing. Make sure you grab the copper crush gaskets off of these too. There's one under here and up there on both of them. You can see right there. And it comes off just like this. So you got one crush gasket there, and then another one under the head of the bolt. Now these two are 18mm to hold the starter on. These are the only ones on it. So I'm just gonna take them off like that. You're gonna wanna label these too, because there's a lot of 8mm bolts in this and they're all different sizes. So make sure to grab some bags and label them up. Then the starter just slides out of there. Takes some force because there's O-rings inside of that, and they like to stick on the inside wall right there. Now we're gonna get this side plastic piece off of here. Looks like it's got a fan inside of it. These are standard bolts. Looks like someone put these in after. These definitely aren't original. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this off. Now that we got this outer piece off, this is the next piece that has to come off. It has two 10mm bolts and also a spacer behind it that goes right here on this piece. But after that fan comes off, this piece comes off, and it has 4 10mm bolts in it also. It goes on just like that right there. So now let's move on to something else on here. And before I pull this cover off right here, I wanted to show you guys a trick. I always take a marker when I need to remember where something is, and then, you know, mark it like that so that these little hangers go back where they're supposed to be. And then also, like these bolts right here, you can see one goes into the case, which means it's gonna be longer than this one that just stops right here in the water pump. So you'll go ahead and mark the spot and the bolt so that it can go back where it's supposed to be. On this front cover, all the bolts are the same size except for these 3 right here. One goes up here, another goes, let's see, right there, and then one goes right there. So 1, 2, and then 3, and that's the different size bolts right there. And the last piece to be able to take this front cover off is a 17mm bolt right here. You're going to want to use an impact on it because it's attached to the crank, and that moves. So it also looks like there might be a sort of retaining piece right here. I'm probably going to have to pull this off to be able to fit this end guy out. Oh, never mind. Comes out just like that. Put that there with the bolt. Now it looks like we'll pull out this last bolt and take this front cover off. Now that I got this front cover off, it just slides right off of these little shaft ends right here. If you wiggle it a little bit, it's got some dowel pins in it, or these little guys, whatever you call them. And the stator is also right here, so it sticks a little bit. And this is also why we have to do a complete rebuild, because I dumped the chain down in the engine right there. I don't know if this is going to be fixable, but there's some pretty deep grooves carved into that little track piece right there. You can see it on the back, the little metal shavings on there, and also this stuff going on right here. Now moving over to the other side of the engine on the internal clutch right there, you can see that there's already 2 bolts missing. I don't know how they came out or where they went, but there's 2 missing. So these are all 8mm. We're going to pull them all out now. Now that I have this cover off of here, the 2 long bolts, one would go right there and one would go right there. You can see because they have those little centering pins on there. And that is one of the bolts I was missing along with this one, so I'm gonna have to get new bolts for that. And over here on this other side, you have to get this magneto off of the crankshaft right here. And the way you do that is you pull out these bolts and get some longer ones, and I'll show you what to do next once I get the rest of these out. And now I have some bolts to pull this magneto off. These are M8 by 1.25 metric bolts. So what I'm gonna do is come down here, thread them into that hole right there, that one and that one, basically the ones that they came out of, except you can see that there'd be nothing to push off of back there. So I got these washers and just slide them down so that they're in the way of the back of the hole, so we can press them off of this flywheel piece right here. So I'm gonna get that threaded on there and pull it off. Now I have it pressed off of there. Just about gave me a heart attack when I finally broke it loose because it snapped like crazy. I thought I broke something, but apparently the way you get it off is you don't pry it off this flywheel here. You pry it off this back gear, which you can see the bolts go onto there. Just make sure you're really careful not to knock any of the teeth off of that gear. But I had to get it pretty tight so that it would break loose. That thing snapped like crazy. Well, now I'm gonna get that off there and clean up all the grime that's hiding out in that magneto, and then we'll see what's next. There's also something interesting I saw in this that I wanted to point out. This keyway right here. See if it'll focus. If you can see that, it's starting to get cut off right there. You can see it denting, and that holds, or that would go in the keyway right here on the magneto that goes into the shaft right there. And another thing, these bolts right here that hold this flywheel onto this Magneto, the threads are all smashed on them, like it was getting loose in there, which is a little bit weird because it doesn't seem like it would do that, but it was smashing the threads on it. I also went ahead and put a white dot on all the gears so that I remember which way faces out. So now I'm gonna start taking this stuff off. Also, it looks like someone might have already been in here because that little tab is all smashed up. So now I'm gonna start taking all this stuff off here. Now over here on the clutch side, I knocked this clutch off right here. It's also splined, except like most of it, it seems to want to stick. So I saw that they left a hole right here in the block. So I put a punch in there and hammered this out. You can see, didn't really damage it, but I'm not sure it really mattered anyway, because you can see that clutch is absolutely totaled. Starting to peel up right there even. So now I got this out, I think that is the last thing I need to get off on this side. So I might just try splitting the block that way. I believe that I got all the bolts out. There's a couple of ones that are pretty sneaky and where they put them. So you got this really long one right here. It goes in that hole right there. And then on this side over here, you can see there's a hole up in there. So you're gonna wanna make sure to get that one out. It's pretty sneaky in there, especially if it's packed in mud like it is. So now I'm gonna try whacking this thing apart. Hopefully I don't have to take any of the other stuff off, like the transmission or drive shaft section off. Now I think that was way too easy. All it took was a couple taps and it just separated. So hopefully nothing goes flying out. Fingers crossed. And I think just like that, it's separated. I'm gonna pull them apart now by hand. Well, I just separated the two halves of the block here. That's the bottom, that's the top. And it is definitely not a pretty sight. Here's a piece of the piston. Got some, so there's a big chunk of metal right there on that gear. And then some smaller pieces here. You can see that it was definitely the right decision to do a complete rebuild on this, because we're gonna have to go through all the gears, make sure everything's still good, all the bearings, hopefully they're still good. But that is definitely not good right there. Now, because of how nasty everything is in there, I'm gonna have to take all of this stuff out, including that crankshaft. I don't know how I'm gonna get it out, but it's gonna have to come out so that I can pressure wash this inside the case out and make sure everything is perfectly clean to put back together. So the first step, it seems like, to get this transmission section out is I'm gonna have to pull this front cover, release this shaft right here, the gear selector shaft, so that everything can slide out. Now I have this transmission gear selector loosened up, so it's ready to come out. It also looks like this gear set sits over the gear with the chain on it right here. So I took the 4 12mm bolts out. They're all the same length. And comes out like that. Set it right here. This top gear right here on mine also has a shim, so make sure you don't lose that when you go taking all this stuff off, because this gear on the top is loose and tries to fall off. I just pulled the transmission out and a little ball fell out right here that goes in this spring spot right here. So I guess now that you're watching it, take this bolt out before you go trying to get this out, because it makes it a whole lot easier. You can see that the ball rides in these little holes there. Other than that, that's pretty much out. There's also another chunk of piston right here, and then a few more big ones down there. So I guess I'm gonna start working on this stuff here. Hopefully you can get it out pretty easy. Now I have the counterbalance shaft out. You can see this also drives the oil pump down here. And you can see that the chain fell off or something in there too, because it's all marred up right there. This counterbalance also does have a little mark right there that you're gonna have to make sure to line back up with this guy on the crank pulley like that, so that they're properly balanced and doesn't vibrate apart. So now for the last and hardest, I'm gonna be trying to pull this gear. Well, I just went and pressure washed it all. I made the executive decision to leave the crank in for right now. We're still gonna get this out. Just gonna have to be a little bit. So it's all pressure washed, and I got the stator cover up here. I'm gonna go through, blow it all out, make sure there's nothing left. Same with all this stuff here. So I'm gonna get at it. All right, I may have found a way to get this gear off of the crankshaft. You can see this is the outer section right here. I pulled off the snap ring right here, and also that inner guard thing that covers up these springs. And you can see I have a bearing puller in there with some extensions on it to get it out far enough. So these little springs, you can see that one right there has a bar in the middle of it, and that one doesn't, so I marked the spots of where all the bars are, just in case they come flying off. And you also have to get this chain under the bolt side of this, otherwise it pushes up the edge of the bearing puller. So now I'm gonna see if I can get this gear off of here. Well, there was something I didn't know here. Once you take that gear off, you're able to fit it through this bearing hole in the case. And the way we got that out is we had a block of wood right there on the ground, and then we just slammed it down on it, hitting this on the end of the wood so that it would knock it out. And once it was out, we tried pulling that bearing, and it was just still, or this gear thing, whatever it is, we tried pulling that and it was still stuck on there and just will not come off there. So the new crank comes with this already on it, so that's just what we're gonna go with. I'm not gonna try getting this off anymore. So now it's all split apart and torn down. So that'll be it for this video. The next video will be a complete rebuild of this and fitting it back in the side-by-side. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, share this with someone who might want to see it, and keep going.